Welcome back to the Fulton County Gospel News Podcast. My name is Barry Odell, and I am your host. Fulton County Gospel News is a bi-monthly publication put out by the Church of Christ in Mammoth Spring, Arkansas. Visit our website, mammothspringchurchofchrist.com, and on the left-hand side of the homepage, you will see several tabs that are related to the Fulton County Gospel News. And you can see all the papers from 1953 all the way up until the latest edition from this month. And if you'd like to subscribe to the paper, all of our contact information is on the website as well. Email, phone number, Facebook page, all of that information. So if you'd like to get the paper either through the United States Postal Service or through email, get a hold of us and we'll be more than happy to add you to our mailing list. In today's episode, we're going to talk about Daniel's Cogitations. I've got a very good friend who has a podcast, and I suppose that many of you who listen to this one also listen or know of the podcast called Cogitations, done by my friend Tony Brewer. And he based the title of his podcast off of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 28. The Bible there says, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." And so the question is, what was he talking about? What were the thoughts or the cogitations that he was having that bother him to such an extent that even his physical appearance, his face changed because he was so troubled? That's what I want to talk about today. Let's talk about Daniel's cogitations. So the book of Daniel obviously is one of the prophets of the Old Testament, and Daniel is such an interesting book, so valuable for us. Daniel was a victim of the Babylonian captivity at the end of the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel, and Nebuchadnezzar was the Babylonian king who headed up that war against Jerusalem. Of course, you can read about that in the latter part of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, 2 Kings 25, 2 Chronicles 36, and you can read some information on those events that took place. Well, Daniel is one of those who was taken captive into Babylon. And so, along with his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and I suppose they're better known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're better known by their Chaldean names instead of their Jewish names. But anyway, that's what the book of Daniel covers, the events of their lives in captivity and the visions that they saw, the events that they endured during that time of punishment from God at the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Now, another interesting thing about the book of Daniel is that it covers approximately 60 to 70 years. It covers quite a span of history in the life of Daniel. When he goes into captivity, he is a teenager, and by the time he's thrown into the lion's den, he's probably mid-80s. And so we need to understand that too. But again, throughout the book, Daniel is seeing visions. Daniel is given the power by the Spirit of God to interpret dreams, which he does for Nebuchadnezzar. We think of Belshazzar's handwriting on the wall in Daniel chapter 5. And so, again, a very interesting book and very much needed for us to study, to see how God's people should handle themselves in times of great difficulty. Anyway, let's get to it. So Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel had some thoughts, some deep thoughts, or cogitations, as the King James says, that greatly troubled him to such an extent, again, that his appearance changed, and he kind of went inward. He kept the matter in his heart. Well, he's given a vision. So we start reading in Daniel 7 and verse 1. "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts come up from the sea, diverse one from another." Well, then so that's Daniel 7, verses 1 through 3. And then from verse 4 down through verse 8, Daniel describes these four beasts. Now, this is not unusual language, and it's not an unusual type of literature in the book of Daniel. In fact, I would say most of your book uses this type of symbolic literature. So let's do this real quick. So in Daniel 7, 4 through 8, he describes these four beasts that arose out of the sea. Here's the good thing. Daniel tells us the text tells us what these beasts are. So we'll just jump real quick and figure that out. Down to Daniel 7 and verse 17. He says, or rather he's told by an angel, these great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. Well, there's part of the vision interpreted for us. In fact, you go then to verse 23. It's still being explained to Daniel what he saw. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms. So now we know what the four beasts represent. They represent four kingdoms. Now, this is directly tied into Daniel chapter 2 and Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a great statue that was made up of four parts. And you remember from Daniel chapter 2, Daniel was called in. No one else could tell or interpret the dream. Daniel was called in to interpret that dream. So I'm turning back to Daniel chapter 2. And listen to what he tells Nebuchadnezzar, beginning in verse 36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. Again, this is Daniel talking to Nebuchadnezzar. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And you remember that great image that he saw, made up of different earthly minerals. Well, he tells Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, you're the head of gold. Well, after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. So we know from history that after the Babylonian Empire, in fact, the book of Daniel tells us this directly, after the Babylonian Empire, the Medes and the Persians came into power. So that's Daniel 2:39. Another kingdom shall arise. And then a third kingdom. Well, that's Greece, Alexander the Great. We know that from history. And then Daniel 2 and verse 40, then a fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. We know that to be Rome. Again, secular history tells us all this stuff. And the interesting thing is, so with Nebuchadnezzar's vision, the first three kingdoms are pretty straightforward. Gold, silver, and brass. And, that's not hard to understand. But then when you get to that fourth kingdom, which again we know time-wise is the kingdom of Rome, it's diverse. It's different from these other nations. Well, then you get to, I'm going back to Daniel chapter 7 now. So again, it's pretty straightforward. The first kingdom, Daniel 7 verse 4, was like a lion and had eagle's wings. The second kingdom, or rather the second beast, was like to a bear. It was raised up on one side and had three ribs in its mouth. Okay, so you've got a lion, you've got a bear, and then verse 6, the third kingdom, you've got a leopard. But then you get to the seventh verse of Daniel 7, and you have this fourth kingdom. And it's similar in description because of it's so different from the first three kingdoms. So if we know what the four kingdoms are of Daniel 2 represent, we then now know what the four kingdoms, the four beasts of Daniel chapter 7 represent. So again, that fourth kingdom represented in Nebuchadnezzar's dream was diverse, made up of different minerals. Well, this fourth beast, which represents a fourth kingdom, is different. It's different from the lion and from the bear and from the leopard. It's diverse. It's dreadful and terrible, Daniel 7:7, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. And then it talks about 10 horns and just quite a different type of animal, literally, in his vision. But then we have this told to us in Daniel. So again, Daniel's seeing this vision, and remember, his cogitations troubled him. His countenance changed because of this vision and because of the explanation that was given to him about this vision. So in Daniel 7, 1 through 8, those four beasts are laid out. We then know from verses 17 and 23 that the beasts represent four kingdoms, just like Nebuchadnezzar's image as recorded in Daniel chapter 2. But then we get to Daniel 7 and verse 9. As Daniel's watching these four beasts, it says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down. Well, obviously the implication there is the thrones of these four kingdoms, the thrones of these four beasts, because they are the kings, they are kingdoms. So beginning in verse 9, we're reading about God's judgment. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. Now we know who that is. That's God. Whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool, and his throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. Well, here's the question. What judgment? It has to be the judgment of these four kingdoms, because that's what's being discussed here. The first one was like a lion, the second like a bear, the third like a leopard, and the fourth was just dreadful and terrible and different from them all. This is showing God's judgment against all four kingdoms. And here's the thing, all four of these kingdoms, whether we're talking about Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, or Rome, had a history of persecuting God's people. Anyway, back to Daniel 7 and verse 11. We finished verse 10. The judgment was set and the books were opened. Well, obviously, that's God's judgment upon these nations. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. Well, we know who that's talking about. That goes back up to verses 7 and 8 in this fourth world empire, which is Rome. Daniel's receiving a vision here that the kingdoms of the world that oppress God's people are going to be judged. They're going to be brought down. In fact, he says in Daniel 7 and verse 12, as concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. Okay, so again, Babylon fell to Medo-Persia, Medo-Persia fell to Greece, Greece fell to Rome, and it's not like they disappeared overnight. I mean, the civilizations were still there, but they were not the dominant world empires anymore. So the end of Daniel 7 and verse 12 says, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Now, here we get to the key of this passage. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. Now, this is so important here. The Son of Man, so there are three people in the Bible referred to as the Son of Man, and only three people. Ezekiel, Daniel, and Jesus Christ. Now, there are other uses of that phrase, Son of Men. I think of like Psalm chapter 8 and verses 4 and 5. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? So the term is, this phrase is used in general of humanity. But specifically, there are only three people in all the Bible who are identified as the Son of Man. So this either has to represent Ezekiel or Daniel or Jesus Christ. Well, here's then the question. Which of those three individuals came with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days? Well, that's only Jesus Christ. So let's finish reading verses 13 and 14, and then we'll make some more comments on that. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Now, if you remember from Daniel chapter 2, the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, you will recall that it struck that great image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, struck it in the feet, destroyed that image, and then that stone grew and filled the whole earth. And so Daniel's seeing the same thing here in a different format, if you will. So Daniel 2 is Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Daniel 7 is Daniel's dream. And he's seeing the same vision in different format. And I would say in higher detail, if you will. It's during the judgment of this fourth empire that the Son of Man is said to come with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days. And when that happens, there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom. So here's the great question that we have to ask. When did the Son of Man ascend with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days? That answer is so simple and so straightforward. I'm going to share several verses with you here. I'm going to take my Bible over to Mark chapter 16. Of course, I would say we typically think of Mark 16, and we think of the Great Commission in Mark 16, verses 15 and 16. But listen to what Mark records for us as that chapter ends. Mark 16, verse 19. So then after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God. When did the Son of Man ascend to the Ancient of Days? It was after his death, burial, and resurrection. That's when he ascended. That's when he came to the Ancient of Days. Now, then we turn over to another passage that is even clearer. Well, I don't know if it's clearer, but it's certainly clear. I'll leave it at that. Acts chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. This is speaking of Jesus, his last words with the apostles before he leaves the earth. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld. So there are 5 sight words that come out here in Acts 1, 9 through 11, showing that the disciples saw all of this happening. While they beheld, he was taken up. Now listen to the language here, because remember, Daniel 7, verses 13 and 14 says that the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days. So Acts 1, 9. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud, there's our cloud, received him out of their sight. The question is, well, where did he go? And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven, as he went up, behold, 2 men stood by them in white apparel, which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? Now, so why are they gazing up into heaven? Well, because Jesus was taken by a cloud into heaven. They watched it. And so, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as you have seen him. They saw him, by the way, go into heaven. When Daniel 7, 13 and 14 talks about the Son of Man coming with the clouds to the Ancient of Days, we know what that's talking about. It's the ascension of Jesus Christ after his death, burial, and resurrection. That's when he was taken up. That's when he was seated at the Father's right hand. I mean, that's what Mark 16, verse 19 says. But then you turn the page in Acts. You get to Acts chapter 2. Let me turn over here. And you get to verse 32 beginning. Listen to this. This Jesus hath God also raised up, whereof we are all witnesses. Therefore, being by the right hand of God exalted, that coincides perfectly with Mark 16, verse 19. And having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he has shed forth this which you now see and hear. For David is not ascended into the heavens, but he saith himself, The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand, until I make thy foes thy footstool. When did Jesus ascend and sit at the right hand of the Father? After his death, burial, and resurrection. That's Mark 16, 19. That's Acts 1, 9 through 11. Peter reiterates it here in Acts chapter 2. But, hey, if that's not enough, let's look at another passage. I'm going to go over to 1 Peter chapter 3 that talks about Jesus's, let's say, location. Let's use that word. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 22, speaking of Jesus, who is gone into heaven and is on the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers being made subject to him. So now we go back to Daniel 7, 13 and 14. I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. So I just shared with you, 4 or 5 different passages that tell us when that happened. And remember, now we're looking at Daniel 7:14. What happened when he came with the clouds to the Ancient of Days? There was given him dominion and a glory and a kingdom. Folks, that's the church. Daniel 7 is prophesying of the ascension of Christ and his reception of the kingdom at the time of his ascension. And that's exactly what Mark 16, 19 says. That's exactly what Acts chapter 1 and 2 teaches. And that's exactly what Peter wrote in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 22. There's no way around that. And so Daniel sees all of this. And so we get back to Daniel 7 verse 15. I was grieved in my spirit. This vision's really bothered him. And so I came near unto one of them that stood by and asked him the truth of all this. Now, what does all this mean? Well, we've already looked at verse 17. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall rise out of the earth. And we know what that is referring to. The historical kingdoms of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And it was during that fourth empire when the kingdom of God was established, when Jesus ascended to the Ancient of Days and was seated at his right hand and received a kingdom. Well, Daniel wants some more information. It's interesting because, again, the first three beasts were kind of ordinary. A lion having eagle's wings, that's a bit odd, but it was a lion. And then a bear, and then a leopard. Those are pretty straightforward. I mean, there are some interesting things. They've got wings, and one's got ribs in its mouth and raised up on one side. But when you get to that fourth beast, it's diverse. It's different from every other beast that had shown up. And again, we know from simple history that that's the Roman Empire. The progression of those kingdoms from the days of Nebuchadnezzar to the days of Rome, I mean, it's just undeniable. And see, that's the interesting thing about the book of Daniel, too. These visions, whether it's Nebuchadnezzar's in Daniel chapter 2 or Daniel's own vision here in Daniel chapter 7, they are bracketed within that time frame of from Babylon until Rome. And see, God's people are persecuted throughout all of those different empires. But it's during that fourth empire that both Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 tell us that the kingdom of God was established. And Daniel 7 is so specific as to say that happened when the Son of Man came with the clouds to the Ancient of Days and received, dominion and glory and a kingdom. You really can't misunderstand that unless you try. So then what we have here in Daniel chapter 7, again, beginning in verse 16, Daniel wants further explanation about this fourth beast, and so this one who is there with him talks to him about that and the power, the exceedingly great strength that this kingdom had, how it makes war with the saints, verse 21, and prevailed against them. And that, it's kind of interesting that the persecution that Rome inflicted upon the church throughout the first century and then after, there were times when it appeared that the church was losing. It's like in Revelation chapter 6, for instance, when John saw that vision of the souls under the altar who had been beheaded. Remember their outcry? How long, O Lord? When are you going to do something about this? They're killing us. And God's response was, rest for now. Justice will come. Well, listen to Daniel 7 and verse 22. Until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High God. When you look at that term judgment in the Hebrew language, it means justice. God's people were persecuted. There's no question about that. I mean, in Daniel's day, they were in captivity. They were under punishment, of course, ultimately from God because of their own sinfulness, but they were still being punished. First century Christians were still being punished under the hand of Roman influence. But there's coming a day, Daniel's told. Let me just start reading at verse 21. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment or justice was given to the saints of the Most High God. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Now again, we know when that happened. We know when the kingdom came. We know when the Son of Man was seated at the right hand of the Father and was given a kingdom. The New Testament, it clarifies that beyond any question. But verses 21 through 25 of Daniel 7 does show that there was persecution of God's people throughout this time. There's no question about that, and it's going to last for a long time. For instance, the end of Daniel 7:25, it says about the saints of God being worn out or persecuted. It says, they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. It's going to be a while. It's interesting to watch people try to nail down exactly what that means. Some say, 3.5 days, 3.5 years, 3.5 centuries. Well, that's rather speculative because Daniel's not even told by the angel what it represents. I'll tell you what it represents. God's people are going to suffer for an amount of time. But there's coming a day when God is going to judge this fourth nation. And it's during that time, it's during that fourth world empire, the fourth part of Nebuchadnezzar's image, the fourth beast of Daniel's vision. It's during those days that the God of heaven would set up a kingdom. It's during those days that the Son of Man would come with the clouds to the Ancient of Days, and he would receive dominion, glory, and a kingdom. We go to Daniel chapter 7 and verse 28. Daniel has seen this vision. He's wondered about it. It's been explained to him by an angel. And he says, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." Daniel did not, even with the explanation that was given to him, Daniel could not fully comprehend all the historical implications, all the historical events that would come to pass. All of that stuff was not revealed to him specifically. And, Peter even talks about that kind of stuff in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verses 10 through 12. The prophets, oftentimes when they spoke prophetically, looking to future events, they didn't have a full grasp, a full understanding of what was to come. But the preaching of the gospel clears it up. So I tell you what, since I mentioned it, let me go ahead and turn over there to 1 Peter chapter 1, and I'm going to start reading. Let's see here. I'm going to start reading in verse 10. "Of which salvation the prophets have inquired, and searched diligently, who prophesied of the grace that should come unto you, searching what manner of time the Spirit of Christ which was in them did signify, when it testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glory that should follow. Unto whom it was revealed." So, the prophecies were revealed to the prophets. But then he says here in 1 Peter 1:12, "Unto whom it was revealed, that not unto themselves, but unto us they did minister those things, which are now reported unto you by them that have preached the gospel unto you with the Holy Spirit sent down from heaven, which things the angels desire to look into." And so that just shows me that such as Daniel, here in Daniel chapter 7, while he saw the vision, there was an explanation given to him. He did not have a full comprehension of everything and all the details that would take place. He knew that God's people would be persecuted, that there would be many difficult days ahead for them. But during the days of that fourth empire, the kingdom would be established. And it was when the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days to receive dominion and glory and a kingdom. Folks, that's Acts chapter 2. Peter tells us that. He tells us that in Acts chapter 2. I forget what verses we read. What was it? Verses 29 to 32? He is exalted at the right hand of God. Mark 16:19. Acts 1:9 through 11. 1 Peter 3:22. Let the Bible interpret the Bible. Those were Daniel's cogitations, and he kept the matter in his heart. But it's interesting to look at the totality of Scripture, knowing who the Son of Man is, knowing who the Ancient of Days is, knowing when the Son of Man went with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days to receive a kingdom. That happened on the day of Pentecost when the church was established. That's the New Testament explanation of that passage. So now we know Daniel's cogitations. Listen, I appreciate you listening to this edition of Fulton County Gospel News Podcast. I know this one's been a bit longer, but it probably should be a little longer than this, but that's quite an interesting vision that Daniel saw and that was interpreted for him and that can be understood by us in light of other passages of Scripture that tell us about the ascension of Christ and his receiving a kingdom when he was seated at the Father's right hand. Well, again, I appreciate you listening. If you're listening on Podbean and you have any questions or comments, you can comment on each individual episode. Feel free to do that. Again, you can visit our website, mammothspringchurchofchrist.com, and all of our contact information is there if you have any questions or comments. If you listen on Spotify, Google Podcast, I would encourage you to share this, subscribe to this, and that will help us get God's Word out to as many people as possible. But I really do appreciate you listening, and, I guess that's it. I guess we'll catch you on the next episode of Fulton County Gospel News Podcast.